Hey, what's up, guys? Danny here. So I think we're a little bit early about talking about some of this stuff, but there's been a lot of chat recently about the used games situation in relation to the Xbox One and the PlayStation 4, and some of my journalist peers have been talking about this. Ben Kuchera, Penny Arcade, and Total Biscuit were kind of chiming in on the console manufacturer's side, saying that this is inevitable and giving various reasons as to why the used games market is a bad thing. I want to talk about that because I think there's a fundamental misunderstanding about the dangers of used games. From my background in working in retail, I worked in games retail for about 8 years on and off. I worked at independent game stores that had trouble like competing with the big boys. I worked at GameStop for a number of years, whose business model is essentially based around used game sales. And I also worked at HMV, which was a store which was trying to get into sales on top of its music and DVD stuff, and kind of struggling to do it and struggling to get into the used games market as well. I'm under no illusions that the digital future is coming. I think it's inevitable that we're going to get to a stage where games are sold digitally, and I think that's a good thing. But I think there's a misunderstanding about the dangers that used games have in relation to the business models of the big console manufacturers. When I was working in these various shops, the type of people who were trading in games and buying used games were doing it completely aware of the amount of money they were spending on games. These were people who would often bring in old games to purchase new games, and in doing that were buying games knowing that they could trade them in. So these were people who were buying often even stuff like Call of Duty, which we kind of consider in the core gaming world to be a multiplayer game. But the amount of people who would buy it just to play the single player, knowing that they'd completed it during that week, and they trade it in and get whatever, €25, we're talking euros here, whatever, $25, off of their next game. This was also the case with like single player stuff like BioShock 2 and Tomb Raider and stuff like that. Like even Uncharted, like games that were really good, but people knew they'd finish them up, trading them in against new games that were coming out. So that was one side of it. There was a lot of people that would do that, and you'd know them face to face. You'd know them coming in frequently, and also there'd be random people coming in doing essentially the same thing. And then the other marker for me was kids. These kids under 18 who didn't have jobs or maybe had a small amount of pocket money and stuff, who were very clever about what games they decided to buy, or maybe they got stuff for their birthday or Christmas, and then they were trading that stuff in to get used games, and often trading in games to buy new games. So these were people that weren't not buying new games. They weren't. There's this often a lot of talk about this whole like $5 off the top of the price point, and that's what was killing new game sales. Like people were coming in and buying Call of Duty for slightly under, and that's what was killing new game sales and stopping publishers getting their money. That rarely ever happens. One, because the amount of people who were trading in those games week one was so low, and two, because the price differential just wasn't enough. So I find it really strange that there's this onus on the new games not selling because of all the people trading in old games, and that game shops were somehow not just supplying a service that was incredibly popular. There's a reason why this works. It's because when people play games, they feel like they got their value out of it, and when they trade them in, it's almost like free money. And if you're trading in two games you've already completed or never going to go back to play, unless you're somebody who really likes hoarding games, then it's a no-brainer. So that was predominantly the type of people over the course of almost a decade of working in shops that were trading in games. So on top of that, the problem that causes, I think, going forward is if we take away the used games market, what we have is a situation where the back catalogue of games that people have access to is a lot smaller. The Xbox 360 has been out for 8 years now. 2005 is when it was released. The amount of back catalogue of cheap games that were available, and this was predominantly in the used games market, not in like off-the-shelf re-release platinum versions or cut down lower price point versions of games, was massive. And that was a huge deal over the repeating success of these consoles selling. It's the reason why like a load of kids would go get an Xbox or a PlayStation 3 for Christmas, because they knew they had all these games, and also a lot of the time it was because they knew their friends had it and they could swap games. So if we're taking away that market, if we're taking away the sort of the mid-tier games that nobody wants to really buy and hold on to, and then we're taking away this massive back catalogue of cheap games and the ability of people to trade them between each other. What that says to me is that the mid-tier games that are already suffering are going to suffer even more, that indie titles that are cheap are going to sell higher, and that the blockbuster franchise games are probably going to be okay, but that there's going to be a percentage of people that were buying those that are now going to stop doing so because they know they can't trade them in anymore. Like, maybe I was in some sort of a bubble, maybe the Great Britain and Ireland is a different use case to the US, but that's what it shouts out to me. So that, I think, is an issue that it's not so worrying that this new digital future is coming for me. It's that the communication and the language we're hearing from developers and from Microsoft is that used games are killing sales, which I don't think is true, and I don't think that their onus is going to be on providing a reasonable alternative for consumers. So, we're talking about Microsoft, who are a company who have Gears of War, on the friggin' Xbox on-demand service for like, what is it, like $40 or something. Like, they don't cut these down. Okay, I'm pulling that number out of my head. But you frequently go on there, and the cost of games they have there is just completely ludicrous. So if we're asking Microsoft and games publishers to re-release games at cheaper rates, like we've kind of gotten used to on Steam, like, I don't know, put a gun to my head, I'd say they're probably not going to do it. And it worries me, because I think that the soft-core gaming market or whatever, like the people who buy games but not a lot of games and then trade them in and stuff, I think that they're going to be pretty jilted, and that I would imagine those people would be more influenced to pirate games and to hack their consoles going forward. I don't know. That's what I think about it. So I just wanted to say that. If you guys have any feedback, please leave them in the comments below. Follow me on the Twitters at Dwyery if you so wish. And subscribe. I'm going to do some more of these little things on the friggin' YouTube channel because I'm bored and sometimes I don't have enough time to edit something. So, yeah. Let me know what you think. Use games. I like them. Stop video. Again.